We're following breaking news out of New York right now. A 4.8 magnitude earthquake rattling the tri-state area just a few moments ago. Initial reports indicate the shaking was felt in New York, in New Jersey, down in Philadelphia, as well as Washington, D.C.
Hey, good morning, everyone. What is going on? It's rattling everywhere. There is another earthquake in New York, and it's 4.8 magnitude. So that is quite high. I mean, New York, guys, there just has been an earthquake in New York a few months ago, but now this is 4.8, and that is larger than the last one. And it has rumbled through the northeastern United States at 10:23 on Friday morning, according to the United States Geological Survey. It has sent tremors from Philadelphia to Boston and jolting buildings in Manhattan and throughout the 5 boroughs. So the USGS reported that the earthquake epicenter was near White House Station, about 40 miles west of New York City. So the agency estimated the depth of the bedrock rupture at 2.9 miles. So that's not very deep. And in nearby Lebanon, New Jersey, China plates have rattled in people's closets, and it has really frightened residents. They were running out of the streets, and they did see that trees were shaking, cars were shaking, and the ground was shaking. So it could really be seen and it could be felt. And of course, after one like this, there's always aftershocks. So what's the forecast for the aftershocks? So will the ground around White House Station in New York continue to shake in the coming days? And the experts are saying almost certainly. So they have already been several small aftershocks in the area, but those aftershocks were not that big anymore. Thankfully, they were only around the magnitude 2.0, and they were barely perceptible even to people that were standing right in the epicenter. You can see a map here from the USGS, and there you can see the epicenter of the quake, and then you can see the lighter areas is where it still could be felt, but the strongest point was there. So very interesting. So many people have linked these earthquakes to the coming solar eclipse. That's why before we go into deeper reports, what people are saying, how it looks in New York, I want to just mention that quickly. There's a total solar eclipse. It's set to pass through to the United States this coming Monday. And, you know, it's easy to imagine that there might be a link between unusual events up there and on Earth, but the geoscientists, they're cautious about making such a connection. So they're saying that earthquakes always happen along fault lines or cracks between 2 blocks of rocks on the Earth's crust, and tides stretch and squish the land on Earth just as they contribute to waves in the ocean. And those tidal forces grow, of course, as the sun and the moon and the Earth begin to align. And sometimes a configuration like this creates a solar eclipse. One theory is that this might introduce additional stress along the Earth's fault lines, and the scientists are saying that we do know that the relative position of the Earth and the moon and the sun does exert tidal forces. So there are several studies that have studied the results between earthquakes and tides, and it is inconclusive. Usually earthquakes are driven mostly by the motion between 2 tectonic plates, either when 2 plates are sliding along or in opposite directions as we have it in Iceland, or when one slides underneath the other like a subduction zone. All these types of movement, of course, introduce a strain at the junction, and then which often gets relieved by an earthquake. At the moment, the experts are saying it is difficult to say that plate motion was responsible for the quake that shook the Northeast today. So they say it's not quite as obvious because there is no tectonic plate boundary in this area that is active. But One thing that we know, and that is everywhere on the Earth's crust, there are fault lines from past activity everywhere. So some of these faults can still be storing stress and then could trigger something like this. Who knows, right? It's not uncommon to see earthquakes there. So the USGS has logged in 188 earthquakes with a magnitude of 2.5 or higher within a 250-mile radius of New York City since 1957. So in that time frame, though, only 7 have had a magnitude above 4.5. So today's earthquake is quite high if you compare it to the past. So it had the third highest magnitude that has ever been measured there. And you can see by this map here, you can see there has been a 5.1 in 1983, there has been a 4.5 in 1982, and then we see where the current earthquake is located. And in proximity in the 60s and in the 90s, there was a 4.5 and a 4.6, and then out in the water, 2019, 4.6, and 1992, a 4.8. How much damage can these earthquakes do? And what if a bigger earthquake happens right in New York? So right now, for the New York City residents, the earthquake that happened today, it might have felt just like a few light shakes, but if an earthquake of greater magnitude were to strike much closer to New York City, the risk of serious damage could be relatively high there. So the 5 boroughs are home to more than 200,000 multifamily buildings that are made with unreinforced brick and built from the mid-1800s to the 1930s. So those buildings are prone to collapse. Those are the first buildings that collapse in an earthquake, the old brick buildings. And this is also according to the New York City's hazard plan. They have plans where they indicate which buildings might collapse in the event of an earthquake. Other cities around the US and Canada have that too. It's like many of these row houses across the city neighborhoods also fall in this category and are prone to collapse. So there's an emergency alert system in place, and it took 26 minutes to alert residents of New York. And we just had the earthquake in Taiwan, and they had a similar issue. Their warning system didn't work. So 26 minutes, I mean, that's not really effective. So by now you know that something happens, right? So that's how long it took New York City officials to send out an emergency alert about the earthquake that had happened there on Friday morning. The earthquake happened in the morning, but imagine, that did not deter people from visiting the Empire State Building, for example, or they might not have known. But on Friday afternoon, around 1 p.m., there were still a handful of people that were up on the Empire State Building, and then they heard their phones buzzing with the emergency alerts, and they were on the 86th floor on the observation deck. So that's not really nice, right? So there is some structural damage. For example, in Newark, the earthquake has damaged 3 three-story houses that are located on 7th Avenue. And the residents are saying it was a noisy rattle and it came through there like a speed train. That's how it did sound. And so they evacuated the Newark Liberty Airport and also other tenants in the area. And thankfully, officials have reported no injuries, but definitely nearby streets were closed off, and 3 of these houses were partially toppled and sending them into each other like the domino rocks, right? So it's really... What do the structural engineers say? So that earthquake today that has shaken the greater New York City area this morning would have been a normal event in California. That's a statement from one of the country's leading structural engineers. So that earthquake certainly brings attention to the fault lines that are located in the region. So this is a Ramapo system of faults, which runs through the arms of the northern Appalachian Mountains in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. The faults are lines of fractures between two blocks of rock in the Earth's crust, and that's the geologic layer that is closest to the surface. The U.S. Geological Survey has put it at magnitude 4.8, and this is quite large for that fault system. So many people are surprised when they feel or experience an earthquake in or around New York City, but already in 2008, researchers have highlighted the seismic hazard that are faced by New York. Who would have guessed? They are not uncommon, but they're also not a surprise. So in 2008, the researchers at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University have analyzed 383 quakes in a 15,000 square mile area around New York City, and they have estimated that a magnitude 5 earthquake in around the city occurs on average once every century, while a magnitude 6 or larger quakes occurs every 670 years, and even a larger magnitude 7 is estimated at once every 3,400 years. So it can really rattle there. The question is just, where are we in that time frame? They have looked at the earthquake that occurred in this area between 1677 and 2007, and also their data that they have gathered by their seismic instruments in the past 34 years. And they have mapped out like a family of faults that are responsible for most of these earthquakes. The most recent earthquake that had magnitude 5 or larger was in 1884, and that quake has originated offshore near Coney Island and has toppled chimneys in the city, so it did have an effect. So normally the earthquakes in the northeastern United States are smaller and less frequent than in places like California, for example, or Japan, but the risks still warrant attention from officials. That's what researchers are saying. So even a modest earthquake could wreak millions of dollars of damage in Manhattan. And here comes the surprise. The lack of larger earthquakes in that region makes the smaller earthquakes potentially more damaging. That's what the experts are saying. New York's Mayor Eric Adams says he didn't feel the earthquake, but he gave a press conference and he said that earthquakes are unusual in New York City and could be extremely traumatic for the residents. So he urged the New Yorkers to be aware that aftershocks could happen, though a top emergency official for the city said the probability in New York was low. So that's why the mayor said the aftershocks could happen, but people should go about their normal day. Right now, crews are inspecting train tracks for potential damage, and that's why the train speeds were reduced and restricted throughout the Northeast while this is happening. Overall, that earthquake has done little damage. One thing that I found interesting, since I do have a farm and I do have horses, if you're a regular viewer of my channel, you see them. I sometimes report with them in the background. So there was a therapeutic riding stable in New Jersey, and that stable was near the epicenter of the earthquake. And what the owner of that stable is saying, that the ground has been shaking so forcefully that it made 3 horses gallop around the ring really like crazy. And so this is interesting because I have experienced a smaller earthquake. I was in my living room. I live on the Cascadia Fault, near the Cascadia Fault on the West Coast. And I was sitting in my living room and I didn't feel any shaking, but I heard like a loud bang. And I thought, is it like some military plane breaking through the sound barrier? That's how it felt. You could feel that there was tensions on the windows and stuff like this. And then I replayed my pastor's security cameras to see what the horses did in that moment. And they did nothing. That was interesting. They really did nothing. But so it seems this one really has rattled the animals so that they were kind of panicking. And one owner of a general store that is 5 miles away, he reported that the quake, and that's what I've been talking about, created a sound that was so loud that the staff thought that like a semi-truck had crashed into their building. So crazy. And here's a funny story. There's a t-shirt shop in Manhattan, and it was just shortly after that quake, they started selling souvenir t-shirts that had the letters, "I survived the New York earthquake, April 5th, 2024. So yeah. Officials in New York are saying that they have been in touch with counties and as well as nuclear facilities across the state with no reports of damage aside from a gas leak in Rockland County. So what the governor is saying that fortunately here in the state of New York, we are masters of disasters. That's what Katie Hochul, the governor, said. She says we know how to handle this. So I'll keep you updated about this. One thing is for sure that this earthquake has really revealed apparent shortcomings in the New York emergency notification system. And the Adams administration has been criticized just recently for a delayed response to floods and wildfire smoke. And now that it's took 26 minutes to alert residents, that's way too late if that had been something that would have caused more damage and impacted people way more. So that was my update. Very shortly after this, guys, there's news in Iceland about the eruption that is going on there. So stay tuned and check out the videos in the end screen. It's interesting stuff, guys. And if you're new here, I would love to have you on my channel, and it would be so great if you could subscribe. And to everyone, please leave this video a like. I'll finish my coffee now, and I hope you're all having a safe and great afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are, guys. And I'll see you very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.